My name is Layla. I'm 27 years old. The first sound was the slow tear of wrapping paper under my fingers. Soft, dry, delicate. Christmas lights blinked red and gold against my parents' front window. A cinnamon candle burned too sweet on the mantel. The tree in the corner glowed like something honest. My brother Evan sat across the room with one ankle over his knee, phone in hand, looking relaxed in that specific way people do when they already know the room is about to break in their favor. And I was holding an envelope from my new apartment complex. My lease. My keys. My first real way out. I had worked for that envelope like people work for oxygen. Late shifts at a medical billing office downtown. Weekend hours at a boutique coffee shop where tourists asked for oat milk like it was a test of character. I paid off enough debt to qualify. Saved enough for the deposit and a first month. Spent 2 hours at the DMV changing my address paperwork because I believed I was finally doing it. I believed I was finally stepping into a life that belonged to me. Then my father cleared his throat. Not loudly. Just that small, formal little sound he always made before he said something cruel and wanted it to sound reasonable. "Before you open the rest," he said, "your mother and I made a family decision." My fingers stopped on the envelope flap. My mother smiled without any warmth in it and folded her hands in her lap. She had on a red sweater set and pearl earrings, like she was hosting a holiday card instead of an ambush. Evan looked down at his phone, but the corner of his mouth moved first. "Honey," my mother said, your brother needs a little help right now." There it was, not even 5 minutes into Christmas morning, not even after the fake hugs. I looked at the lease packet in my hand. What does that have to do with me? My father leaned forward in his recliner. The leather creaked. Somewhere outside, a car rolled by, playing old Christmas music too loud. Somebody laughed on the sidewalk. Normal life kept moving. Inside that house, mine was being rearranged. "We co-signed for your apartment," he said. "We're not doing that anymore." I just stared at him. Because he knew. He knew the leasing office needed final confirmation by noon on December 26th. He knew I had already reserved the U-Haul. He knew half my things were packed into labeled boxes in the garage because my mother had insisted I could save space until move-in day. My mother crossed one leg over the other. Evan's condo opportunity came up unexpectedly. Condo, not rent, not medical bills, not some emergency. Condo. Evan finally looked up and gave me that loose, careless grin he had worn since we were children. The one he always wore when somebody else had already paid the price and he was about to enjoy the result. "It's actually a smart investment," he said. I still remember how warm that room looked. The twinkle lights, the plaid throw pillows, the smell of cinnamon, ham glaze, coffee, the television on mute showing some holiday parade rerun. It looked like family. It looked festive, it looked safe, but every inch of it felt staged. It's like they had decorated a theft. I put the envelope down on my knee because suddenly my hands did not trust themselves. "You promised me." "And now," my father said, "we're asking you to be flexible." "You're good at landing on your feet," my mother added. That was the family translation. Evan gets the bridge, Layla learns to swim, and I wish I could tell you that was the first time. It wasn't even the cleanest version. When I was 12, my grandmother sent money for a summer art program I had begged to attend for months. I had already picked out the sketchbook I wanted to bring. My mother used the money for Evan's baseball travel fees and told me I was naturally creative, so formal instruction mattered less for me. Evan needed structure. Evan needed opportunity. Evan needed confidence. I needed to understand family. When I was 16, I got accepted into a college prep program in Chicago. The packet came in a thick white envelope with blue lettering. I kept it under my pillow for 2 nights before I showed my parents because I wanted one beautiful thing to belong only to me for a little while. 3 weeks later, my mother said the deadline had passed, and maybe it just wasn't meant to be. Years later, I found out she had never mailed the confirmation because Evan had been caught cheating in algebra and needed a tutor all summer. When I was 19, I had enough scholarship money to leave home. Not enough for everything. Enough to begin. My parents sat me at the kitchen table under that awful buzzing fluorescent light and explained that Evan had crashed his car. Insurance wouldn't cover all of it. And a family in crisis does not split resources selfishly. So I stayed. I commuted, I worked evenings. Evan got another car within 6 weeks and spent half that semester posting beach photos with his friends. That is the kind of damage that happens when you are raised as the reasonable child. You become easy to rob because they train you to call it love. They teach you to measure your own pain by whether it inconveniences other people. They teach you to swallow first and ask questions never. By 27, I had learned 2 things. First, my parents never hesitated to ruin my present for my brother's future. Second, they counted on me staying soft long after I had stopped being safe. So on Christmas morning, I didn't scream. I didn't throw the lease papers. I didn't give them the scene they were prepared to survive. Oh, I just looked at my mother and asked one careful question. When did you decide this? The answer came too fast. 2 weeks ago. I felt that in my teeth. 2 weeks. They had known for 2 weeks. 2 weeks while I packed. 2 weeks while I bought cheap dish towels at Walmart and wrapped plates in newspaper. 2 weeks while I changed my mailing address on my bank app. 2 weeks while I stood in the doorway of my future bedroom in my imagination and pictured silence. Evan shifted on the couch. Don't make it dramatic. I looked at him. His hair was still damp from the shower. He had on the expensive watch my father gave him after he got fired from his sales job for the second time in 3 years. Dad had called it a confidence gift. I called it unemployment jewelry. You knew too. He shrugged. Mom and Dad are helping me build something. You can rent another place later. Later. That word had followed me my whole life. Later for school. Later for freedom. Later for space. Later for me. My mother leaned in, already irritated that I wasn't folding on cue. Layla, do not do that look. We are not taking anything from you. And I laughed, just once. Not loud, not wild. One clean little sound that made all 3 of them look at me differently. Because that lie was too old to wear fresh clothes. I went upstairs with my lease packet, my phone, and the small ornament box, where I kept my passport, my social security card, my birth certificate copy, and the only jewelry my grandmother had ever given me. Downstairs, I heard the television click louder. My mother was already moving the day forward. That she had always believed that if she pushed hard enough, reality would trip and fall behind her. My room was colder than the rest of the house. The baseboard heater clicked weakly. Cardboard boxes lined the wall with black marker labels. Books, kitchen, bath, winter clothes. I sat on the floor in my socks and called the leasing office voicemail even though I knew they were closed for Christmas. Then I opened my banking app. I don't know what made me do that first. Maybe instinct, maybe survival, maybe when you've lived inside a system long enough, your body recognizes theft before your mind catches up. My checking account looked normal. My savings account looked wrong. $7,800 was gone. I stared at the number, blinked once, then again. The transfer history showed a withdrawal from the joint-linked savings account my mother had insisted I keep years earlier because families help each other in emergencies. I had tried more than once to separate everything, and every time she found some guilt-shaped reason to leave one thread attached. Medical paperwork, auto-pay confusion, tax documents, something small enough to sound annoying and reasonable, something sticky enough to keep access alive. The withdrawal had happened the day before. December 24th. Reference note, cashier's check. I went cold, not shaky at first. Cold, like my body had decided heat was a luxury and I no longer qualified. I called the bank's automated line and listened to a machine voice confirm the transaction like it was reading weather. Then I stood up, walked downstairs, and found my mother arranging cookies on a plate like the morning hadn't just split open. "Who took money out of my account?" She didn't answer. My father stood up too slowly. "Lower your voice." I stepped closer. "Who took $7,800 out of my account?" Evan glanced from me to them and then back to his phone. That told me everything. My mother set down the frosting bag. "We used the joint access for the condo earnest money." Used. She said it like borrowing scissors. "That was my move-out fund. And this," she said, "is family property if our names are attached." I looked at her, then at my father, then at the plate of iced sugar cookies shaped like stars. He folded his arms. We were going to tell you." "After you drained it?" "You are still acting like a victim." That should have hurt more than it did. Instead, something inside me went very still, because victims beg to be believed. And I was done with that. I went back upstairs, closed my bedroom door, and sat on the edge of my half-packed bed until my breathing slowed enough for thought to come back in full sentences. Then I started doing the one thing my family had never noticed I was good at. I got organized. I opened a notes file and typed, "Christmas morning, lease revoked, savings withdrawal, condo earnest money." Then more started surfacing. Not memories exactly, evidence. Scholarship shortfall, summer program deadline, a credit card I did not remember authorizing, a delayed tax return, a lost interview email, but Grandma's trust with less left than expected. Once I started, it didn't feel like remembering. It felt like a room lighting up one switch at a time. And if you have ever had one of those moments where your whole past suddenly rearranged itself and made terrible sense all at once, then you know exactly what I mean. Stay with me, because this is the point where I stopped being confused and started becoming dangerous. That afternoon, I texted my boss, Nina, and asked if I could come in the day after Christmas for extra filing work. She wrote back 5 minutes later. "Yes. And Layla? You okay?" I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed the first honest thing I had said to anyone in years. "No, but I think I'm about to be." The next morning, I packed every essential document into my tote bag and left before my family woke up. Frost still clung to the driveway. My breath came out white. I stopped for coffee because I had slept maybe 2 hours and needed something hot enough to feel like intention. At the bank, I sat across from a woman named Teresa with silver glasses and a voice so calm it nearly undid me. She pulled up the account history. "Because your mother remained a listed joint owner, the withdrawal was authorized access." Authorized, not fair, not decent, not right. Authorized. I nodded once. "Can I close everything connected to them today?" She looked at me over the rim of her screen. "Yes. We can open new accounts and transfer what remains." What remains? There is grief tucked inside phrases like that. I signed forms until my hand cramped. I changed every password sitting in the lobby. I canceled overdraft ties. I ordered copies of every statement from the last 5 years. Then I asked Teresa something that made her pause. "Can I get records showing who was added, when, and any address changes?" "You can request that." "I want all of it." By noon, my old financial life was dead. Not healed, not repaired. Dead. And that mattered. For the next 3 weeks, I lived on my friend Danny's pull-out couch. She had a one-bedroom apartment above a nail salon in a brick building with bad parking and thin walls. The radiator hissed like it had opinions. The upstairs neighbor vacuumed at feral hours. The hallway smelled faintly like bleach and onion powder. I loved it instantly. Yet because nothing in that apartment belonged to people who thought they owned me. Danny and I had drifted apart years earlier. At least that is what I thought. The first night on her couch, after 2 glasses of cheap red wine and half a frozen pizza, we figured out the truth in under 10 minutes. Your mom told me you didn't want me around, Danny said. I looked up. She told me you thought I was using you. Danny let out one long breath and leaned back against the arm of the couch. Wow. A pause. Your mom really curated your life. Curated. That was the word. Not raised, not protected, curated. Over the next month, I pulled every thread I could find. At work, I asked Nina if any old emails still existed from the insurance company, where I had nearly landed a full-time administrative role at 24 before the offer mysteriously disappeared after the final round. Nina had worked there then too. She called an old coworker. 3 days later, an email chain landed in my inbox. The company had sent the offer. My mother had answered from an address almost identical to mine, saying I was grateful but moving out of state to help with a family illness. They thought it was me. I read that message once, then again, then 10 more times. The fake account used my first initial, last name, and 2 numbers from my birthday. The signature line copied my phone number with 1 digit changed. Plausible, clean, just enough to reroute an entire life. Thus, I sat at my desk under fluorescent office light and felt 24 years old again for one terrible second. Then something new came in behind the hurt. Not panic, shape. That is the only word for it. Shape. When the monster stops being fog and becomes something with edges. Something you can point at. Something that can be named. I printed the chain. I started a binder. Front tab, financial. Second tab, employment. Third, education. Fourth, estate. That last one came from my grandmother. Her name was Evelyn Hart, my mother's mother. She smelled like Yardley soap and peppermint tea. She taught me how to iron a blouse, how to write a thank you note, and how to recognize when someone was asking for grace they had not earned. And she was the only adult in that family who ever looked at me like I wasn't just leftover material from someone else's plan. When she died, I was 22 and too numb to fight. My mother told me Grandma had left a little something for both of us kids, but medical bills and probate had eaten up most of it. I believed her, because grief makes paperwork look like weather. Now I went to the county clerk's office on a wet gray Tuesday with a folder in my bag and my lunch break cut down to 19 minutes. The building smelled like old carpet, toner, and rain. A woman at records directed me to probate filings. I filled out a form. Estate of Evelyn Hart. Then I waited. The clerk came back with copies. I stood at a side counter and read with one hand pressed flat against the paper to steady myself. Grandma had left me $20,000 earmarked for education or housing support. Not shared, not split. Mine. There was a notarized letter attached from her attorney explaining that she wanted Layla's independent future protected. Protected. My mother had filed a receipt of distribution signed 2 years after the estate closed. My signature was there. Only it wasn't mine. Close enough to pass if you didn't know my handwriting. Not mine. I remember the fluorescent buzz overhead. Somebody coughing near the copier. The page looking too white. My own hand on the paper like I could hold the room still by force. And the rage didn't come all at once. It came slow, clean, like a tide taking stairs. They had not just favored Evan. They had built him out of me. His first rehab for gambling debt after college? I paid partly from Grandma's money. The certification course I thought I couldn't afford? Buried. The apartment I was trying to move into now? Delayed by money that should have been protected years before Christmas. I took every copy I could legally request. Then I called the law office listed on the probate file. A receptionist transferred me to Martin Keller, the attorney who had handled the estate before retirement. His voice sounded older, slower, but sharp. My name is Layla Hart, I said. Evelyn Hart was my grandmother. There was a pause. Then he said, I remember you. I closed my eyes. Did you ever meet me in person after the will closed? No. Your mother said you didn't want involvement. Of course she did. Did you witness me sign anything? No. Well, those documents came back through your mother. Later that night, he reviewed the copies with me over video. He adjusted his glasses, looked at the signature, looked at it again. The silence after that was heavy enough to bruise. I can't give a courtroom opinion from this call, he said. But I can tell you that signature raises concerns. Concerns. Adults always have such neat words for ugly things. He referred me to a civil attorney named Rebecca Sloan. Rebecca's office sat above a florist across from a parking garage. She wore navy suits and asked precise questions without once trying to protect my family's image in the room. I brought the binder. She turned the pages. Her jaw tightened twice. Then she looked up at me and asked one question. How much do you want to do? I didn't even think. All of it, she nodded once. Then stop warning them. That sentence changed my life, because until then, some part of me still carried the old reflex. Explain, clarify, appeal. Rebecca stripped that out of me in 5 words. Over the next 6 weeks, we built something stronger than anger. We built sequence. Bank records showed repeated small transfers over years from accounts my mother had retained access to long after promising to remove herself. Tax records showed my parents had claimed me in a year they should not have, costing me a housing credit. Email evidence tied my mother to the fake job response address. Probate papers showed likely forgery. And there was one more thing. A credit inquiry attached to a mortgage prequalification under my Social Security number from the same lender now processing Evan's condo. But that one nearly knocked the air out of me. Rebecca called the lender herself, not to scream, not to posture, to freeze everything. I sat in her office while she spoke in a tone so polished it cut through the room like glass. My client did not authorize the use of her information in support of this application. We are putting you on notice of identity misuse and requesting immediate suspension pending investigation. Then she clicked her pen closed. I watched power happen quietly. It was one of the most beautiful things I had ever seen. Meanwhile, my parents kept texting me like we were having a mood issue instead of a legal rupture. Call home. Your brother is under enough stress. Families work things out privately. Do not embarrass us over paperwork you don't understand. Paperwork. Hey, my whole life they had hidden inside that word. Forms, deadlines, signatures, claims, all the places theft can dress up as responsibility. I didn't answer. That silence changed them faster than any argument ever had. First came annoyance, then guilt, then fear. Then came the first crack from outside the house. My Aunt Trish called me on a Sunday afternoon while I was folding laundry at Danny's. She and my mother hadn't properly spoken in years because Trish had once told her at Thanksgiving that raising a son is not a lifelong excuse. I was 12 when she said it. I worshipped her for months. She got straight to it. Your mother left me a message saying you're unstable. I almost smiled. That usually means I found documents. There was a tiny pause, then a dry little laugh. I knew it. She told me she had suspected something after Grandma died, because Evelyn had mentioned more than once wanting money protected for me, where Vivian can't reroute it. Vivian, my mother. Hearing someone call her by her first name instead of Mom felt like a window opening. Then Trish told me one more thing, a memory from years earlier. My father, drunk at a 4th of July barbecue, bragging that he had handled my Chicago program because Layla gets ideas above her station when she's praised too much. I stopped folding. My hand stayed on a t-shirt I didn't even remember picking up. Would you say that again if you had to? Yes. No hesitation. Just yes. By March, Evan's condo purchase was collapsing. The earnest money issue triggered review. The lender wanted cleaner documentation. Rebecca sent notice. And I filed a police report regarding possible identity misuse because she told me that clean records matter even when families beg you not to make it official. I froze my credit, filed fraud alerts, got a P.O. box, changed doctors, changed emergency contacts, changed payroll deposit records, changed phone passwords. Every step felt small. Together, they felt like oxygen. There is nothing louder than a woman quietly removing access. My parents finally came to my office on a Thursday afternoon in March. Rain streaked the windows, printers hummed down the hall. I was carrying archived claim files when Nina appeared at my desk, wearing that expression managers get when they are trying to stay professional and failing. Your parents are in the lobby. Security is with them. I set the files down. Did they say why? Your mother says it's a family emergency. Your father says this will be easier if you don't make a scene. I laughed. Actually laughed. Easier for who? I walked into the lobby wearing my work badge and saw them standing under the company mission statement like they had arrived to negotiate the release of something they thought still belonged to them. My mother looked expensive and tired. My father looked furious in a pressed windbreaker. Security stood close enough to matter. We need to talk, my mother said. You can email my attorney. Don't do that in public, my father snapped. You came to my workplace. My mother lowered her voice and stepped closer. This is getting out of hand. The lender called Evan. Lawyers are making threats. Not threats, I said. Yeah, notices. My father's face changed at that. He hated precision when it didn't belong to him. You are punishing your own family. No, I said. I'm interrupting a pattern. My mother's eyes hardened. You always wanted to be separate. Fine, but don't rewrite history because your brother got more help. I looked at her. Then I looked past her at Nina, who had not moved from reception. Then I said it calmly. Did he also get my job offer, my housing money, Grandma's estate distribution, my social security number? My father stepped forward. Security stepped too. And for 1 second, I saw panic. Not in them, in the air around them. Because control works best in private. Witnesses change things. Private family business, my father said. Forgery is not a family value, I told him. It's a crime. Security asked them to leave. My mother turned pale in a way I had never seen before. That was the first time I watched her understand that image would not save her. But the real exposure came in April. My cousin Brooke got engaged and scheduled a family dinner in a private room at a steakhouse outside town. White tablecloths, amber pendant lights, framed black and white city photos on the walls. The kind of place where people lower their voices because the bread arrives in linen. I had no intention of going. Rebecca told me I didn't need to. Then Aunt Trish called. Your mother has been telling people you forged papers to steal from Evan. I closed my eyes. Impressive. And, Trish added, they plan to announce at dinner that the condo deal fell through because of a malicious interference campaign. There are moments in life when your enemies hand you the stage they built for themselves. This was one of them. So I went. I wore a black dress I had bought on clearance and never found a reason to use. Danny did my hair at her kitchen table while we ate takeout fries out of the carton. She looked at me in the mirror. Remember, she said, calm is expensive. She was right. The private room glowed gold when I walked in. My mother was already there, kissing cheeks and smoothing narratives into place. My father stood at the bar with 2 brothers-in-law and that performance of wounded dignity he always did when he wanted sympathy before facts arrived. Evan had the face of a man who still believed charm was a strategy. Then I saw one more person, Martin Keller, Grandma's former attorney. He was seated near Aunt Trish, invited by Brooke's father through some Rotary connection. I had told him about the dinner, only because Rebecca wanted him available if the family tried public lies affecting the estate matter. I had not expected him to actually show up. When he saw me, He gave me one small nod. Not rescue, just confirmation. Dinner moved the way those dinners always do. Wine poured, laughter rose and dropped, silverware clicked. Brooke cried during the toast. Everybody clapped. Then my mother stood. Of course she did. She raised her champagne glass just high enough to claim the room and smiled that gracious, polished smile she used whenever she wanted people to confuse elegance with innocence. Before dessert, she said, I just want to say how grateful I am for family. Even when there have been difficult misunderstandings this year. My spine went straight. Aunt Trish set down her fork. My father leaned back, ready. Evan looked rehearsed. My mother kept going. Some people believe independence means turning on the people who raised you. I hope, in time, grace returns to this family. There was that soft murmur, that carefully baited opening. Then my father added without even bothering to stand, especially when false accusations damage your brother's future. There it was. I stood up slowly and placed my napkin beside my plate. Every eye in the room moved. I remember the water in my glass catching the pendant lights in broken strips. I remember the smell of pepper and steak. My mother's perfume, the AC set a little too cold, a tray rattling somewhere beyond the door, everything sharp, everything exact. I agree, I said. We should clear up the misunderstanding. My mother's smile held for half a second too long. Then I reached into my bag and placed 3 copies on the table nearest them. Bank withdrawal history, probate distribution records. The fake job email chain. Paper makes a very different sound than drama. Sharper, flatter, much harder to interrupt. My father stared at the stack. What is this supposed to be? Documents, I said, since words never seem to work with you. Layla, sit down, my mother said. No. Then I looked around the room, at cousins, spouses, an uncle who always suddenly found his water glass fascinating when family conflict started. Brooke frozen with one hand over her engagement ring, and Aunt Trish steady as a wall. Martin quiet, watching, and I said it clearly. On Christmas morning, my parents withdrew support for my apartment so they could help Evan buy a condo. They also took $7,800 from a joint-linked savings account containing my move-out fund. Over several years, they used my financial information, forged probate paperwork tied to my grandmother's estate, intercepted a job offer sent to me, and misrepresented assets specifically left for my housing and education. Silence isn't actually the part I remember. Faces are. Confusion first, then disbelief. Then the moment people looked down at the documents and realized the story had weight. This is insane, my mother said. County clerk probate file, bank statements, metadata from the fake email account, credit freeze documentation. My attorney has copies. Evan shoved his chair back. You are blowing up Brooke's dinner because you're jealous. I turned to him. Jealous of what? A beat. A life financed out of my pockets? That landed hard, because plain truth always lands harder than performance. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. My father stood so fast his chair scraped. You ungrateful little... Martin spoke before he could finish. I handled Evelyn Hart's estate, he said. Miss Hart is correct that funds were earmarked directly for her. I also reviewed the signature discrepancy she raised. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. My mother actually swayed. Martin, you have no right. I have every right to state what I remember when my name is attached to the file. Aunt Trish took off her glasses and laid them on the table. And while we're clearing things up, she said, Dave, you told half your backyard on July 4th that you killed Layla's Chicago opportunity because she was getting too proud. My father looked at her like betrayal had only just been invented. Brooke's mother covered her mouth. Somebody whispered, "Oh my God!" Brooke looked furious, not at me, at the fact that her engagement dinner had become a crime scene in Nice lighting, and I hated that part. I still do. Collateral damage is real, even when justice is necessary. My mother made one last move then. Tears, not many, just enough to imply cruelty in the witness. Everything we did was for this family. Evan needed help. Layla was always stronger. There it was. Their whole religion in one sentence. Use the strong one. Call it a compliment. Bill her later. As I looked at her and felt something I had never felt in that room before. Not rage, not fear, not hope. Nothing. Nothing except the need to finish clearly. You didn't love me differently, I said. You valued me differently. You treated my future like spare parts. My voice never rose. That mattered. Because people hear women very differently when we refuse the breakdown they prepared for us. Rebecca had warned me that consequences do not arrive with music. She was right. There was no perfect cinematic collapse. No thunder. No miracle line that ended everything in one clean strike. There were just pieces. My father shouting and being asked by restaurant staff to lower his voice. Evan grabbing the documents, then setting them back down when he realized 3 other people already had copies. And my mother trying to leave gracefully and catching her heel on the chair leg. Brooke crying in the hallway while her fiancé held her. Aunt Trish standing beside me near the door like a chosen witness. That was enough. After that night, things moved quickly. Rebecca filed civil claims. The estate matter reopened. The lender cut Evan off completely. My police report and attorney notice stopped any use of my credit immediately. My employer documented my parents' workplace visit and had them formally trespassed from the property. My tax records were amended. My bank produced older statement logs showing a pattern ugly enough to make even my own denial feel embarrassed for surviving so long. Some relatives called me brave. Some called me cruel. Some did what weak people always do when a family system breaks in daylight. And they said the truth was probably somewhere in the middle. It wasn't. The middle is where comfort hides when courage costs too much. By June, I had my own place, not the original apartment. A different one. Better, actually. 3rd floor, brick building, narrow balcony, laundry-in unit, light gray walls, a view of a sycamore tree that flashed silver green when the wind hit it right. The lease sat signed in a blue folder on my kitchen counter, beside a notary receipt, utility confirmations, and a ceramic mug Danny brought over on move-in day that said, "This is what peace looks like." The first night there, I ate takeout pasta cross-legged on the floor because my couch hadn't arrived yet. No television. No voices downstairs, deciding what belonged to whom. No one asking me to postpone my life for somebody else's convenience. Just the hum of the refrigerator, the far-off sound of traffic, my own keys on my own counter, and that quiet hit me harder than any fight ever had. A week later, a certified envelope arrived from my parents' attorney. They wanted settlement discussion, not apology, not repair, discussion. Because even then, they still believed everything was negotiable if the right adults sat around the table. Rebecca handled it. Some funds were repaid. Not all. Some claims stayed open. Some things never come back in the same form they were taken. Years do not return as checks. Careers do not rewind because a parent finally got cornered. But the law has its own kind of mercy. It records what happened. It says no when love failed too. I haven't spoken to Evan since the restaurant. He sent one message. "Shay, you ruined everything." I read it once, then deleted it. No reply. Because that sentence was finally true, just not the way he meant. I ruined a structure. I ruined access. I ruined the family habit of building his tomorrow out of my today. My mother left 2 voicemails in August. In the first, she cried. In the second, she sounded angry enough to burn paper. Neither one asked what I needed. That told me everything still living inside her. My father sent a birthday card with no note. Just his name. I returned it unopened. There are doors you close loudly. Then there are doors you close so completely that silence does all the work. The last piece came from my grandmother. In a way. Martin mailed me a handwritten note found clipped to old estate correspondence after a storage review. It wasn't dramatic. And not a new will. Not some courtroom miracle. Just a note in her slanted blue ink. If Layla ever has to stand alone, tell her I knew she could. Then tell her she should not have had to. I sat at my kitchen table and cried harder over that than I ever cried over the money. Because some grief is not about what was taken. It is about being seen, too late, by the one person who noticed the shape of the wound. A month after that, Danny and Aunt Trish came over for dinner. I cooked badly. The garlic bread burned at the edges. The salad had too much dressing. Danny brought pie from the grocery store bakery and insisted it counted as homemade if you transferred it to a ceramic plate. Trish stood at my sink drying wine glasses with the confidence of a woman who had survived her own people and no longer apologized for knowing things. And after they left, I turned off the kitchen light and stood by the window. The sycamore moved in the dark. My signed lease was in the drawer under my phone charger. My documents were in a fireproof box in my bedroom closet. My accounts were locked. My credit was frozen except where I chose. My job was mine. My keys were mine. My future was finally expensive enough that I had stopped letting guilt shop with it. A peaceful life is not a small thing. For some women, it is the boldest revenge. And mine did not sound like shouting, it sounded like a deadbolt turning from the inside. That is the part people don't always understand when they ask if I feel guilty. No, I don't. I grieve some things. I grieve the years. I grieve the versions of myself that stayed softer than they should have because softness was how I survived. I grieve the girl who kept thinking the next sacrifice would finally make them fair. But guilt? No, because I didn't destroy a family. I told the truth about one. And there is a difference. A huge one. If you're listening to this, and you were the reasonable child too, the easy one, the understanding one, the one who got praised for taking less and less until there was almost nothing left of you, hear me carefully. They will call your boundaries cruelty. They will call your memory drama. They will call your evidence betrayal. Let them. Some people only recognize love when it arrives as access. That is not love. That is entitlement with family photos around it. And if this story is hitting somewhere deep for you, then you already know why I'm saying this next part. Drop a comment and tell me where you first learned that being the strong one was just another way of being used. I read more of these than you think. And if stories like this mean something to you, subscribe. Not because I'm chasing numbers, because sometimes hearing one woman say it clearly is how another woman finally starts saying it to herself. I'm 27 now. I have my own place, my own records, my own keys, my own name on every door that matters. My family still exists, just not in the center of my life. And that is the ending they never planned for. Not me broken, not me begging, not me circling back for scraps. Just me. Standing in a quiet apartment, locking my own door, and finally hearing what peace sounds like when nobody gets to take it from you anymore.